Yo, yo, yo. What's good, yo? I know it's Monday, and I know the stream says Sunday, but I know it's Monday. And the reason why y'all didn't get a Sunday show was because yesterday I got back from New York yesterday. I got back to New York yesterday. I was in Miami the last couple days. You know, I went down there for Vasyl. Anybody who is from the States who's kind of into bougie shit pretty much knows what Vasyl is. So I was down for Vasyl. Between how many sports cars I've seen and how many drug dealer girlfriends I've seen, I don't know which one I've seen more of. But it's heavily invested in that. White people in Florida do not age well. They look like salmon half the time. But it was good weather, you know. Couple breezy days. Breezy nights, if I should be specific about it. But nonetheless, I had a good time out there. It took a couple days. I was supposed to go down there for business, but I ended up going down there for personal matters as opposed to business. And then I came right back to this shitty ass cold weather. You know, but the one thing about me, when you from places like New York, you kind of miss it after a couple days. For me, if I travel anywhere in the United States, after 3 days, I kind of just want to be home. If I travel internationally, it's usually 5 days. And even though like more and more I get used to traveling, especially the last 3 years, I think I've done maybe about 12 or 13 trips in the last 3 years. I always get homesick after a couple of days, but I love traveling. I really do reap the rewards of it. I got a great travel card, and I like all the perks that I get. So traveling is just stress relief. I get to go out embellishing different cultures. I suggest anybody who has the opportunity to travel, you should travel without a doubt. But of course, you know, despite the fact that I did travel, we had some boxing this weekend. Or I should say the weekend that passed. And of course, you know, everyone's favorite fighter, you know what I'm talking about, was on display. But we have a whole lineup for tonight's live broadcast. You know, doesn't really matter if people watch it or not. I enjoy doing these because I haven't been able to really do much videos, but I enjoy these. We got a couple topics we're going to talk about tonight. I won't spend too much time on them. I'm going to talk about Amir King Khan selling his chin yet again to another fighter. The WBC is willing to sanction a rematch between Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury. We're also going to talk about HBO's last show. We're going to get into a little bit about the Charlos. And then we're going to end it talking about Vasyl Lomachenko. If any of y'all haven't already, make sure that you go and you subscribe to all the brothers in the Lions Den boxing community. You may love us, you may hate us, but we don't give a shit. And of course, make sure you like or hate or subscribe to my shit, because I'm that nigga. But you know who ain't that nigga right now? Who ain't that nigga right now is Kell Brook. That's who ain't. For a couple of years, I pretty much, you know, when it came to Kell Brook and Amir Khan, I had taken a very, very strong stance on siding with Kell Brook back in like 2015. Because it made all the sense in the world for Amir Khan to fight Kell Brook at that time. These were two guys in their primes. Kell Brook was an undefeated world champion who was highly touted in the welterweight division. Many people felt that he was the best welterweight in the world. Now, because of all that, you had Amir Khan, who was chasing both Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. The thing about that time is that Amir Khan spent most of his time chasing Floyd, while Floyd and Manny Pacquiao were always going to be tied to each other in a fight. Amir Khan really thought that he had the opportunity to get that fight because he's watched guys that he felt that he was more talented than get that fight. You know, a lot of people will always talk about the fact that Marcos Maidana got a Floyd Mayweather fight instead of Amir Khan. And they'll talk about, well, Amir Khan beat Marcos Maidana. Of course, they're going to leave out some details into it. Like, they're going to leave out the fact that Marcos Maidana had lost to Amir Khan in a very close fight at a weight class below what both men were competing at around the time that Maidana got the Floyd fight. Key piece of detail they'll also leave out is when Floyd did his little bullshit poll, he kept it at strictly certain accounts that needed to sign up for, I believe it was Facebook, and it was going directly through the Mayweather Promotions website that you had to vote. This was a time when Amir Khan, I think he had something like, was it 2 million Twitter followers? Yo, what's up, Reef? I think Marcos Maidana maybe had like 85,000 Twitter followers at that time. Something like that. And through it all, you had to have Facebook and you had to log in through it to vote through the Mayweather Promotions poll. So Khan won that poll heavily because when you do the math at the end of the day, you really only needed 60,000 votes to really get more than 51%. I think he won that poll by like 65%. Other sporting outlets did their own polls because they felt that the Mayweather Promotions poll wasn't sufficient. So ESPN did 2 polls. Fight News, I think, did a poll, and somebody else did a poll. I think it was Boxing News did a poll. And each poll had Marcos Maidana winning. Now, that poll was generic to strictly to people voting based on their IP addresses. Now, what that means is that means anybody with a computer who cast a vote, you couldn't go back to it and vote again if you wanted to because you were using your computer's barcode in order to vote. It's not for a way for them to track you, but this is how like people vote for shit like the ESPYs and, you know, fan voting and shit like that. And Khan lost all those polls, so Floyd ended up fighting Marcos Maidana twice. Maidana got paid, not crazy amount of money. I think Marcos Maidana made something like maybe $5 or $6 million, but that money stretched long in Argentina. While Amir Khan was left fighting guys that he's been still kind of fighting to this day. But Amir Khan has always been the type of fighter to sell his chin to the highest bidder. And in 2015, he got a big fight. In 2016, I should say. When he gave his chin to Canelo Alvarez. When Canelo Alvarez didn't really have much of an intention at that time of fighting Gennady Golovkin, who was the mandatory for his title back then. And Khan fought Canelo at a catchweight at 155, and he got knocked the fuck out in the 6th round. A lot of people was like, hey, but he was doing well. He was winning. Motherfucker got knocked the fuck out. And nobody wants to see it again. So, Gennady Golovkin was seeking an opponent that same year. And Kell Brook, doing the classic monkey see, monkey do, saw Canelo versus Khan and said, hey, if Khan is going to go out and fight Canelo, then I want Gennady Golovkin. And people argue with me on this aspect of, well, Kell Brook wasn't fed to Gennady. Yo, Canelo, not Canelo. Not even Khan. I got my words fucking mixed up. Kell Brook got fed to Gennady Golovkin. I don't care what anybody says about that. If you are a guy who isn't even head and shoulders above your division, and you're trying to move up 2 weight classes to fight one of the hardest punches in the division, and this isn't some middle of the pack middleweight. This is a guy who is clearly the best guy at that weight class. And your promotional handlers are saying, hey, you know, it makes money. Sorry, but they're not looking out for your best interest, in my opinion. And Gennady Golovkin broke Kell Brook's face. Kell Brook ended up getting his face broke again by Errol Spence in a fight that I told many British people that he was going to lose. And they were like, no, he's hyping him up like he's another Jeff Lacey. Got his face broken again. And, of course, Kell Brook since then has been fighting at 154, a division that he's too small for, in which I said to people the biggest mistake he ever made was going up to fight Gennady Golovkin, because he conditioned his body to be a way that it shouldn't have been, and then he had to cut all that out when he fought Errol Spence, and now his body is just isn't adapting to a lot of the things that he used to do. Amir Khan kind of pretty much had a little bit more leeway when he moved back down. He moved back down and he went right back to 147. He has not looked good since coming back down in weight. I mean, he fought guys like Phil LaGreco, and then he was out here struggling against, who was it? What's this guy's name? Samuel Vargas, who was a fucking cherry pick for Danny Garcia not too long ago. And of course, people are like, you know, Khan and Brook, you know, they could still fight. Yeah, it's not the fight that there once was. You know, back in 2015, when Floyd had 3 belts, Khan versus Brook would have easily let you say, hey, that winner could fight Floyd Mayweather, unify all the titles, and we would get it. Oh, what's up, Haplotype? But of course, neither guy chose to fight, and then they let it kind of go on, doing their own thing, and then it ended up being a situation where they didn't want to essentially fight, and now they want to fight each other. Now they're under the same promoter, and yet you still can't get the shit done. Amir Khan is talking about all these restrictions that he wants and all these things that he wants as a part of it, and me personally, I really don't care much for the fight anymore that I once did. I haven't even made much videos about talking about it. I haven't even talked much about it. It's only a talking point because I need something to talk about before I get to shit that I care about in this stream. So, while all that's going on and people are expecting these two to eventually fight each other, in comes Bob Arum and Terrence Crawford to offer Amir Khan the fight. I could see why they want to fight Amir Khan. Number one, people really don't like the Luis Collazo fight, and I can't blame them. Luis Collazo isn't the type of fight that Terrence Crawford needs to be taking right now. I didn't like the Jose Benavidez fight. You know, I thought the Jeff Horn fight was decent. But yeah, I mean, yeah, saying, yeah, how about tell you, Khan's just wasted his career chasing Floyd. And you could say that Brook kind of wasted his career chasing Khan as well, when you think about it. I gotta be honest with there. But at the same time, it's just like, I could see why Crawford and Arum, they want Khan, because as far as I'm concerned, Khan still has a cult. You know, there are people who still to this day, they even make YouTube videos obsessing over their love for Amir Khan. And, you know, it pays dividends. Amir Khan's chin is still pretty much hasn't been completely, you know, stomped on. So, you know, he can still get in there and still get clipped, and people will find it exciting. And that's what Crawford is just literally looking to do. Crawford just wants to get in there, put a guy who has a name in there, and see what he can do. And I think they offer him $5 million, which is decent money. Khan will probably get more money fighting Brook. But here's my question: why did Crawford and Arum just offer to fight to Kell Brook? That's the better fight. In my opinion, I think that's way better of a fight than Amir Khan is if they fight Kell Brook. Yeah, that's very true, Hal will tell you. Khan hasn't fought anybody at 147. I keep telling people he hasn't fought nobody at 147. People were saying that I was lying. back in 2016 when I was like, yo, his 147 resume is really, really garbage. It's basura, if we're being honest. But I think Crawford versus Brook is the better fight. I think that's a way better fight, and I think them offering Khan, there's a little left to there to be desired. If it was a situation where Terrence Crawford is like, yo, I'll fight Kell Brook, I could then use a Brook to kind of measure it against Errol Spence. You know, Brook had to come down in weight to fight Errol Spence. Him coming down in weight to fight Terrence Crawford. You know, there's a lot there to be, you know, to talk about since Crawford versus Spence is the fight that I pray we get. It's not looking like really good at this point in time. But I do believe ultimately that when it's all said and done, I honestly think that Khan will probably take the Crawford fight, considering that Khan doesn't give a fuck about Brook. I think the way he's been talking about matchroom fighters kind of gives me clear inclination. He said that Joshua is afraid to fight a Deontay Wilder and anybody else. Not named Deontay Wilder or Tyson Fury. The way he's been talking about certain fighters and matchroom stables lets me believe that it could just be a situation where Khan may just pull one up from Eddie Hearn and just fight Terrence Crawford instead. That's how I feel about that situation. From Terrence Crawford, he needs to put a better opponent in the ring with him. At this point in time, I'm starting to feel a little uneasy about what Terrence Crawford is doing at the welterweight division. I could live with you fighting Jeff Horn. It was a world title. Benavidez is not acceptable in my opinion. And I truly believe that fighting a Luis Collazo doesn't do it. But if you're going to fight between Khan and Brook, I'd pick Brook. I think that's the better fight to me. You know, I think that's a better way to kind of give you a measuring stick of how you go up against the rest of the division. And yeah, I completely agree with Haplotype. Brook's resume at 147 is way better than Amir Khan's. Even some of the stay busy fights that he had at 147, you know, Khan's best fights at 147 were stay busy fights with Brook when you kind of think about it, ultimately. But yeah, that's how I've mostly felt about that aspect to it. But hey, we'll see what happens. Let's talk about the WBC. You know, something that I actually like to talk about. The WBC, also known as We Be Crooks, also known as the biggest pieces of shits at times in the boxing universe. I fucking hate Mauricio Sulaiman. Lord knows, the only person I hate more than that man is probably Abel Sanchez. But I have a lot reserved for Mauricio Sulaiman and the way that he has hoard his rules in boxing, ranging from his inability to properly hand out punishments for people who have failed drug tests to disregarding his own fucking rules when it mattered the most to him. But he actually did something that I actually liked, which is he is willing to sanction the Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury rematch. Now, what that means is that should those two guys rematch each other, it means that Deontay Wilder's title will be on the line because, of course, he's going to get a fucking sanctioning fee from that shit, and shit's going to be expensive. But also at the same time, it means that Wilder isn't held to fight, you know, something like a mandatory or something like that. He doesn't have to do any of that. Which is fine because I really don't want to see Deontay Wilder fight Dominic Breazeale. That's just my opinion on it. I don't think there's anything special about Dominic Breazeale. I believe that he's just a walking knockout to continually happen against the best heavyweights in the division. But Wilder versus Fury getting sanctioned is big because this looks like to be what's next for both these guys. These guys have pretty much talked nothing about, you know, except doing the rematch. And this is typically the kind of language that you want to get out of, like, heavyweights or just fighters in general. Trying to figure out what the fuck is that whistling. But most guys have the tendency not to talk about rematching each other. They always talk about doing this or doing that. But seeing as if like this, I mean, this fight has a lot behind it, and a lot of people are like, jumping at the opportunity to look at it again. And I think the rematch is gonna be bigger, and I think that it makes perfect sense to go through this rematch, because I believe the winner out of this rematch puts himself in a very good position to negotiate a Joshua fight for the end of 2019. I think Frank Warren is even discussing the idea of staging this fight the same exact day that Anthony Joshua was due back in the ring, which is April 13th. And that shit is hilarious. Because no matter who Joshua picks between Dillian Whyte or Derek Chisora, should he fight the winner of that fight, oddly enough, he will be ringside for. That fight isn't going to be as popular, as big, as lucrative as a Wilder versus Fury rematch. And for anybody who is sitting there saying, oh, how could you say that? Well, the proof is in the numbers. These guys generated over $24 million in pay-per-view in the U.S. alone. When you think about it, there's probably going to be another, 10 to 12 million coming from the UK in pay-per-view that adds on top of it. When you add that on top of it, you're talking about close to a $35 million pay-per-view generated market. And then you think about gate numbers. They have the opportunity to end up in a rematch potentially doing better numbers, even getting close to the $50 million revenue mark, should it happen. Joshua's biggest revenue generating fight, which is the Klitschko fight, generated about $56 to $58 million. If Wilder versus Fury's rematch and can generate close to 50 and there's a clear winner, it's time for people to stop making excuses for these flat fee offers and offer them a percentage. And it puts them in an even worse position, because now you have a fighter who can generate revenue in two different markets, something that Joshua can't do because he hasn't done, and he adds more value to the fight, possibly even as much value as Joshua adds. And I wouldn't be mad if they sat there and said, I wanted a 50-50 split. You're talking about a fighter who has access to two markets in comparison to one. And the guy who's supposed to be the guy who's the A side hasn't even, established himself in the market that one guy has. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how that rematch goes. And right now, Eddie Hearn is scrambling to try to offer this fight to either of these guys instead of them rematching each other, because he's aware of the position that they end up being should there be a clear winner. If it's Deontay Wilder or Tyson Fury, he knows that when it comes time to negotiate, he can't do no dumb shit. And Anthony Joshua has locked in April 13th as a date for Wembley. They haven't talked anything about another time where he'll be locking in a date past April, which means that the good old US of A and Vegas can bet on a fall fight, and Eddie Hearn is going to find himself in even more shit if he turns down a lucrative offer from a United States venue, which can outbid any venue in the UK, which I keep having to remind people. But yeah, this sanctioning thing is important, and I hope that both these guys get it made. I hope there's no injury or no delays in their rematch. Both guys feel pretty good about rematching each other, which is the important part. And neither guy has talked down it. They have been very open about how Hearn has been. They feel like he's under a lot of pressure and they don't really care. They care about what the fans want, and the fans want that rematch. So I hope they give it to us. I'm not gonna go ahead and start talking about who wins the rematch. I'd like to have that good to go, create some hype around it, and we'll see what happens. But guess who ain't gonna get any more fights? HBO. HBO closed out its boxing program last Saturday, oddly enough having to compete with ESPN at the same time in Vasyl Lomachenko's fight. And it was really funny because this week, well, not this week, but last week, I found myself in a nice little conversation with a couple of boxing quote-unquote journalists. on Twitter, and they were talking about the aspect of when PBC's fruition came. Many journalists were worried that overinflating the purses for fighters was a negative aspect of boxing. Yeah, paying fighters too much was a bad thing, is what they were saying. But now they look at the competitors who are starting to get into this market with big budgets are starting to do the same thing, and they've been relatively quiet. Which is why, like, you look at, Amir Khan, Danny Garcia being offered, a couple $1,000,000 to go fight on ESPN. And many people are like saying, "Oh, they should jump. They should take that money." A couple years back, when it was PBC doing that, promoters were suing them for offering lucrative opportunities, even though they were willing to pay their promoters to do these things. And one guy who talked about the aspect to PBC, quote unquote, stealing Golden Boy fighters. Golden Boy was made aware of guys who weren't on the contracts with them. It was Richard Shaver who chose not to renew it. That's what Oscar was mad about. And I keep having to remind people all this time that their lawsuit where they tried to accuse them of stealing fighters was thrown out. The only lawsuit that stuck was when Bob Arum saw HBO going in the route of Peter Nelson, and he was like, "Yo, I need to get the fuck off ESPN." So he came back with a different lawsuit saying that the exclusivity of the network was a problem. Now, good old Dougie Fisher led an argument, not an argument, but a debate. It's not really an argument because he had no reply for me. When I started to give him some cold hard facts, he said that he didn't care about anything else that we had to talk about. He said that the PBC deal had ruffled feathers because of the network problems, and I said absolutely not. PBC ruffled feathers because many people felt that they were stealing fighters. It wasn't until they realized that their lawsuits were trash that they tried to do it. And then another guy came in and said, "Well, they tried to monopolize it." How were they trying to monopolize it? They weren't on HBO. There are plenty of networks that exist in television that they could have gone to. They were just upset because they were on the more popular networks. And that Bob Arum saw the way that HBO was going, and he realized that I already don't fuck with Peter Nelson, so I'm getting off of this network. So that's what he did. And that's why you have Top Rank on ESPN and Golden Boy getting deals and so on and so forth. Nobody really had a reply for that. And of course, this one guy kept saying, "Well, can you show me a time where they violated this and that?" And I said, Top Rank has 30 years worth of crimes underneath their belt. Do you really want me to do the investigative work of them trying to sign fighters, sign to promoters, and getting sued in court, to FBI agents raiding their offices because of match fixing and X, Y, and Z? Like, come on. Let's not get into this. But I always find it interesting that Arum, the guy who spent so many years boasting about HBO, he would put on a fight at the end of the year that competed with HBO's last show. And HBO's last show, nobody really cared much for it. I mean, it's not like we don't like women's boxing. It's just that you don't wait till your last show to make this an all women's boxing card, is what I'm saying. If it just shows your need to not really invest into the sport, is what I'm saying. Not to say that women's boxing is bad and I don't enjoy it, but you were supposed to put on the best fights possible to try to get the best fights possible. And all you really did was shit on really good fighters towards the latter part of your programming. You put more emphasis on this fucking fight game with Jim Lampley that I didn't care much for. And you guys got burned for it in the end. You guys kept shrinking your budget, trying to put on all these pay-per-views. And I hope Showtime doesn't think that it can start putting on more pay-per-views now with HBO out the market. Like, there's certain fights that, yeah, I could deal with them on pay-per-view, but the majority of your program should be on the network. HBO failed to do a lot of things like put streaming on a platform for fans where they can stream their boxing fights. They were so far behind the game, but they were stuck on that damn Nielsen's rating tool that ended up being their downfall because the numbers just started shrinking. Promoters are leaving the network. You're not even able to beat Showtime now in ratings. And Showtime is a network that lets you stream. They let you watch it anywhere you can. They fucking put fights on YouTube on sometimes. They put it on fucking Twitter if they need to. Like Showtime does a lot of free programming a lot of times for fans. It's something that HBO was very reluctant to do. But they closed their show with Cecilia Brækhus. Of course, you know she is the only active undisputed women's champion. She's been an undisputed champion for quite some time as well. And then, of course, Clarissa Shields was on the undercard. Clarissa Shields has fought on like 4 different networks in the last 2 years. So she keeps herself like certainly active at all times, which is very good, especially for somebody like her who's a young champion, very early in her career. And then, of course, you had Jim Lampley crying, giving out his last little sermon. And then they brought back Larry Merchant, of all people. I'm not really the biggest fan of HBO commentators. I just felt like they put too much heavy stock into fighters that really they shouldn't have, and ended up burning them as a cost to it. But as one thing dies, another one rises. And Fox is now actually doing extended programming for boxing as part of their PBC deal. And their first extended program was they did a high-profile segment on the Charlo brothers, Jamel and Jamal. Jamel being the 154 WBC champ, Jamal, former IBF 154 champ, now the interim WBC 160 champ, who is the direct mandatory to Canelo Alvarez. Jamal, after he, steamrolls, Willie Monroe, which I expect, they still have an active ordered Gennady Golovkin fight to determine a direct shot to Canelo Alvarez. Gennady Golovkin and his team pretty much have been the ones that feel like there's no value in that fight, so it sounds like they don't want to fight the dude. Guess you can make whatever you make of that. But in many different people have the roles been reversed, we would be calling it ducking. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to call it ducking for the time being. If Gennady Golovkin and his handlers say they want Canelo Alvarez, then fighting Charlo is the best step that gets it to him. You get a direct title shot. But it's come to their knowledge that Gennady Golovkin doesn't care much for Canelo Alvarez. He doesn't feel like a third fight makes any sense. But he is negotiating potentially with PBC. That could cause lots and lots of tears. And I would love to see that happen. But with the Charlos, Jamel and Jamal, they both got their fight coming up this month. I think I might be going to it. We'll see what happens. It's not this weekend, it's next weekend. I gotta see I gotta see if that's possible. I know I got a Christmas party, but I don't know. Shit. Can I really go? Fuck. Oh well, we'll see what happens. But that's very interesting, or I might just watch it in the crib, to be honest. Jamel and Jamal, they are two guys who have long been needing to be in the spotlight. And they had a segment on Fox where they kind of just talk about them as brothers, as champions, going through boxing. Kind of like a 24/7 feel to it. But the important part is 1.2 million people watched it. That's very impressive. 1.2 million people tuned in to watch two boxers get interviewed and get video done on them. That's not really something that I can really talk about each day. 1.2 is usually like what we claim is really good for fights, but you're having 1.2 million people tune in to watch you talk about your life. That's kind of big and it's kind of important. And I think a lot of people who haven't paid much attention to it should start. If this is how they're kicking off the Fox programming, they're highlighting fighters and sporting events, ranging from Mikey Garcia, Errol Spence, bringing them up during the Cowboys games, to playing their ads and stuff like that. That's major, and that's a lot of things that people are overlooking because of, who's involved. But that's really big, and I think that a lot of people should pay more attention to it. Even though I think Jamel's fight is the better of the two fights, because Tony Harrison is still somewhat of a very solid 154-pound fighter. I don't think it's a walk in the park for Jamel, but I also think it's not a life or death type of fight either. I think it's a nice, stable, balanced, stay busy fight, considering that Jamel has had to fight countless mandatories put in front of him, and he knows that there's going to be a big fight lined up for him next year in Jared Hurd. Jared Hurd wants a homecoming fight before he fights Jamel Charlo. And Jared Hurd had his recovery fight from, of course, he had the shoulder surgery. He wants his homecoming fight, and I'm going to let Jared Hurd have it because it's very hard to do what he's done in the last 3 years of boxing, from going relatively unknown to a top pound-for-pound fighter and unified champion. So I got to give credit where credit is due. I'm not going to sit there. I'm not going to shit on him wanting a homecoming fight, considering what he's done. I do think, though, Jamel Charlo is going to be the guy that probably hands Jared Hurd his first loss. But I am looking forward to that fight. I think it's a great fight to be made. I just hope that it does happen next year. And last but not least, let's talk about the fight that happened on Saturday. Vasyl Lomachenko and Jose Pedraza fought in a unified lightweight clash. Now, much different from the other lightweight unification that took place a couple months ago with Mikey Garcia versus Robert Easter Jr., because both of those guys were seen to be two very good guys in the division fighting. Lomachenko versus Pedraza was a guy who's very good versus a guy whom we don't know still how good he is, even though he does have a reputation of a champion. And that's mostly because Pedraza, there's so much that was still left to be desired of him, even after he became champion at super featherweight. But just him being absolutely decimated by Gervonta Davis was something that not many of us saw coming. Not even me. I didn't even think he could lose to Davis. I was just like, Pedraza's gonna win. And I still got them tweets. I still got them videos where I felt Jose Pedraza was going to beat Gervonta Davis. And Gervonta Davis just went in there and fucking bulldozed him. Knocked him out, just beat him up the whole fight. And going into this fight, I was just like, Lomachenko should take care of this. It should be easy work for him. But it wasn't really easy work. And, the Linares fight wasn't easy work either. And I don't really rate Linares high as well. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, he's stepping up in competition. I don't think it's a step up in competition that's what's causing some of these actual, not lackluster performances, but Lomachenko doesn't quite look the same fighter at lightweight that he did in his previous two weight classes. And it could be a situation that he has potentially found his ceiling. Now, plenty of fighters have found their ceilings before. And many of them have to figure out, well, if I want to keep moving up in weight, I have to find an extra gear, I have to find another level to push myself above that. For many guys, when it came to that ceiling, many people thought that Roy Jones' ceiling was going to be light heavyweight. Roy, at the age of 34, found a higher level going to heavyweight. When other guys who were also in the division, who also, like, for years, Roberto Duran, many people thought welterweight would be Duran's ceiling. Duran pushed himself even up to light heavyweight. Same thing with Sugar Ray Leonard. Many people thought that, potentially, middleweight or even light or junior middleweight would be his ceiling, and he pushed himself further. But some fighters found the negative aspect too, pushing themselves up to higher ceilings. Marco Antonio Barrera, for instance, really should have never been at junior welterweight. Even Eric Morales, even though he'd won a title, really should have never been at junior welterweight. Even some of our great fighters like Hector Camacho, he shouldn't have fought as high as he fought, even though the guy had won titles in 7 different weight classes. Some guys, when they hit their ceilings, it's very, very difficult for them to, find the opportunity to find what that mold was, because their body doesn't feel the same. They don't react the same. They don't hit the same. They don't move the same. Vasyl Lomachenko does not move as well as he's used to moving at lightweight, that as he's moved at super featherweight or featherweight. Um, it just seems like lightweight is his limit. And many people thought maybe it was just a Linares fight, or maybe it was just a shoulder injury, and getting the surgery that might have changed things. And yeah, the right hook was missing in that fight against Pedraza. But Pedraza was another guy who was a super featherweight champion that moved up to lightweight. The same thing as Vasyl Lomachenko. Pedraza really didn't look like a guy who had like slowed down for a guy who had moved up the division. Pedraza looked like the same kind of fluid guy that he's normally used to being. Whereas Vasyl Lomachenko is a bit of a lag in that half step. Those punches get through the guard a little bit easier than they should. And his face was a little bit more bruised up than expected at the end of the fight. And I think going forward, Lomachenko may realize that there may not be many years left in his boxing career. But make no mistake about it, I think that he's still one of the best fighters in the sport. But there's no shame in him finding the ceiling as a professional. It may just be a situation that 135 may just be it for him. I don't think him going to 140 is something that he should look at. I think that if he goes to 140 and he takes on if he fights a guy like Ruguru or Jose Ramirez, these guys can do some serious damage to Lomachenko at this point. I also gives me it gives me more affirmation that Mikey Garcia would beat Vasyl Lomachenko at 135 pounds. Do I think Mikey Garcia has a death wish to go to 147 with this Errol Spence fight? Absolutely. And I think that Mikey Garcia coming back down to 135 may even hurt him in a fight versus Lomachenko. But if you were to tell me today if Mikey Garcia and Vasyl Lomachenko were fighting right now at 135 pounds, who would I pick? I would pick Mikey Garcia in a heartbeat. I just think that some guys know their ceilings, and for Mikey Garcia, 135 isn't his ceiling. Mikey still punches harder than any other lightweight in the division at 135 pounds. Even at 140, he carried his power up there, and 140 may have been his ceiling, but he was beating up guys who were top 10 at 140. He was beating durable guys who were bigger than him, guys who were built thicker than him. But at 135, even the guys who were quote-unquote bigger than him, taller than him, longer reach, he hit those guys and they move. You know? He doesn't waste punches. And for Vasyl Lomachenko, I just don't think that he's got everything to keep a guy like Mikey Garcia from beating him. And I'm not even talking about it being close or competitive. I think this would be a wide type of fight. I don't think Mikey Garcia is a guy who Vasyl Lomachenko is just going to go in there and expect to do all the things that he's done to other fighters too. Mikey has a high boxing IQ. He's a guy who knows how to move around the ring. He cuts the ring off extremely well. And Mikey Garcia does not waste his punches. He gets you against the ropes, and he's going to mix up a body-to-head attack. And he may even potentially stop Lomachenko if I were picking between the two right now. For Lomachenko, he adds another belt to his repertoire. Of course, you know, many of us still consider the best lightweight in the division to be Mikey. If you do think Lomachenko's the best lightweight, you're entitled to your opinion. Who might be the next opponent on the list? I would love for Richard Comey to win a title finally and step up and fight Lomachenko, because I think Richard Comey would give Lomachenko a decent fight. Maybe a little bit better than Pedraza. And for what it's worth in this fight, my scorecard is probably going to be a little bit closer than many people. I felt Vasyl Lomachenko won 7-5. I think the extra knockdowns, you got to definitely give him kudos to in the 11th round. My official scorecard was 115-111. I know a lot of people are going to sit there and say, how is it that you can give Pedraza so many rounds? I thought Pedraza did very well early in the fight. I think I had Pedraza, up 3-2 after 5. I thought Pedraza had done extremely well in the fight. And he just slowed down. He started gassing. He was switching southpaw at times. Pedraza had a very good ninth round, I think it was. It was the ninth or the 10th round that Pedraza was lighting Lomachenko up with some shots. And I think after 10, I pretty much had it even. And the 11th and 12th round were all Lomachenko, and that's essentially what he needed. He got those 2 big knockdowns, and then he just ran away with the fight in the 12th. And it ultimately just led to presumably being the decision that, is much wider than I had it. I don't believe in fucking CompuBox, so people are like, well, what about the punch stats? I could give a shit about the punch stats. I think a lot of people are still kind of in this feeling that Vasyl Lomachenko is rightfully deserving all this hype, and I think there's a little bit of them that kind of feel this little weird itch on the back of their necks that, maybe this guy, maybe he doesn't have too many fights left in him. But we'll see what happens. Vasyl Lomachenko is like number 5 on my pound for pound list. I know a lot of people have him number 1. I have number 5. I still think his resume doesn't hold. His accomplishments for his resume, I should say, hold up to guys like Usyk or Naoya Inoue or Terrence Crawford or even a Mikey Garcia. I think a lot of those guys, they've done more than Vasyl Lomachenko at this point. But he's I thought with the Linares fight that was the best step so far in his career. But now with the Pedraza fight, it just seems like I don't think he has an extra gear left to keep moving up. I think this might be it as far as divisions for Vasyl Lomachenko. Because if he does move up, it's got to be the right type of fight. Because if he walks into the wrong type of opponent, it's just going to take away aspects of how many fights that he can even pull off at this point. It's much different from Naoya Inoue, who is in, of course, his 3rd weight class. He's looking to unify the division during the World Boxing Super Series tournament in a much deeper division, I should say, where you look at the bantamweights. But also at the same time, Naoya Inoue is 25 years old doing this. He's beaten some long reigning champions at a younger age, and everybody that he seems to touch seems to just fucking drop in front of him. There's way more of a ceiling with him as opposed to anybody else. But those are my thoughts. I need to get something to fucking eat. I'm starving. If anybody has any questions, make sure you check out Archive. I need to get the fuck out of here. Canelo Alvarez is fighting Rocky Fielding this week. I'm going to a concert instead. Even though it is in New York, I really don't care much for the Canelo Fielding fight. I don't know what else is there really to talk about. It's not really much big news in boxing. Oh yeah. Please, stop talking about Floyd versus Lomachenko at 135. Floyd Mayweather would absolutely destroy Lomachenko at 135. And I'm going to leave it at that.